Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. We are super excited to give you a lot of content in the 45 minutes that we have planned today. So with that, we have some topics that, I know a lot of you are probably thinking about if you're, thinking about a case management migration or if you've, recently been through one. And so today we have some experts that have been in the field and own businesses that really focus in this core area. So with that, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Before we go into that, though, we are going to be giving away some prizes. So we'll have 3 winners that will receive a Grubhub lunch coupon, 1 winner that will also have a free organization architecture review, and then 1 winner that's going to have a free issue fix. So if you're having some tech issues in your firm, please bring those to our attention, and that will be handled by the Micronetbd team. So with that, we have our founders and CEOs, as well as myself and EVP of Micronetbd. My name is Tiffanny Angel. I'm head of partnerships and business development for YoCierge. And so our first founder, we have George Ayub. George, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you founded Micronetbd?
Sure. So I used to lead sales and marketing operations at major fintech, and then we had some major success in growing the company, and so eventually launched Micronet. A lot of senior executives were advising and ventures, so ended up launching Micronet, and company became very successful in helping other businesses succeed, and we launched into different verticals. And so yeah, it's been a good time building the company, and now we are it's been a good journey, and we have solved problems for many verticals.
Great, great. Thanks so much for sharing your story. Super excited to hear your insights today. Next, we also have George Bessenyei, founder and CEO of YoCierge. George, do you want to share with the team of how you founded YoCierge and started in the legal tech space?
Sure. It happened kind of randomly. I had a good friend who ran a personal injury firm, and his name is Bob Gagin, and he was unhappy with the record retrieval service they used at that time, and he was complaining about. And I was actually looking for a new venture, so we tried it out. I set up a team and served only this one particular law firm in Center City, Philadelphia. And it became so successful, then suddenly we opened up to other clients. That was in 2017. We had an incredible growth beyond any of my dreams. And here we are, working with Micronetbd and looking forward for the call.
Great. Thanks so much, George. And I think Amanda has just run over on a call. But, Tashin, we also have you from Micronetbd. So do you want to talk a little bit about your background and role?
Oh, sure. I'm working in Micronetbd for 3 years. I'm here working here as a senior Salesforce project manager and a business analyst. And I'm just here for any kind of tech support if it's needed. So I'm just here to stay and see everything is going smooth or not. But you guys are the one who's going to be doing most of the speaking. I'll just keep myself short.
Sounds good. It's always great to have tech experts, on the call answering questions real time. So, hi, Amanda. Thanks so much for joining. Did you want to introduce yourself and your role?
I'm Amanda Sparks. I'm the executive vice president at Micronetbd. I've been in the legal tech space now for almost a year, and it's been an amazing journey working with these guys at Micronet, and also learning about the medical data records retrieval with you guys at YoCierge, and just helping law firms become more efficient. It's been an exciting journey. So, thank you.
Okay, so for today's agenda, I know we have, several topics around, the challenges of case management. We're going to work very hard to get through all of these today. And if there's any questions that you have, throughout the whole process, feel free to put them into the chat as well. All of the resources that you'll be hearing from today will also be available for you for any follow-up questions. So just a couple items of housekeeping. With that, our today's agenda is to talk a little bit about the data aggregation and migration strategy. Right? It's important to have a strategy ahead of time just to make sure that you're asking the right questions and doing due diligence as you're planning for a migration and getting your data. Questions around clarity and vendor agreements, SLAs. We're going to cover, a lot of the things that vendors don't want you to know. So how to be more strong and advocate, for your data and for your business. And then we're also going to talk about timing, right? Because everybody always has a go live date in mind that they have when they want to, go live on a new system. So, what are the right steps that you can do ahead of time to prepare and establish an accurate go live date in your firm? Next, talking about staff training and change management. Obviously, for every migration and implementation to be successful, it needs to be a team effort, right? So, how can you establish, a KOL or key opinion leader in your firm to really streamline the process and to, be a leader in your firm to ensure that you have a smooth migration? And then lastly, compliance. It's always a part of the process, and security. And so we want to make sure that you have a good understanding of, questions that you should be asking vendors, about their own security protocols and ensuring that you're adhering to ABA standards in your practice and best protocols. Okay, so quick poll for the group, and feel free to just chat in your responses. We wanted a little bit of a ding. I don't know if there's a question. If anybody could see that.
No, there is no question I can see. It's
Okay,
probably, yeah,
great.
nothing.
All right, and people can see my screen moving. I just want to make sure the slides are flowing. Okay,
Yeah, it
sounds
is.
good. Great. Yeah, so a couple questions today for the group. What case management system are you currently using, and are you planning to switch? We have obviously Litify implementation experts here today. Are you using Litify? Plans to switch? Are you using another system such as Clio, Filevine, Smart Advocate? And if you're not currently using a case management system, there's obviously some practices that are currently on paper, and so are you looking for a more efficient way to handle some of the caseload and volume into your practice? So you could just enter your responses in. Okay, so first, what we're going to do is talk a little bit about data aggregation and migration strategy. So, in the concept of data extraction and organizing the data plan, it's important that you have a successful way of obtaining data ahead of time for a successful migration. So George, Ayub, could you expand a little bit to the group about having data ahead of time when you're starting a project is important, so it doesn't delay your timeline, and how you can ensure that, what are the right questions to ask your current vendor about the data formats so that the data is transferred correctly?
Excellent question. So I've seen companies come to us a lot of times after they have converted over to a different legal CRM. They've migrated data. They come in and they have a lot of pain points. And we have also seen migrations that have gone successfully and unsuccessfully. So as someone who have led the projects, and our team does these migrations all the time, and I've seen other people do it and fixing the mess. What we have always seen is whenever there's a problem, what it boils down to from before even you start your implementation, right? It's extremely important to work with a data architect to making sure the source system you're coming from, whether you're migrating from Needles or other CRMs, or maybe you're not using any system. It's super important that you work with the data architect to draw out your data, how your current data is stored in the current database. Maybe you have multiple systems you're using. Perhaps you have duplicates in your data. Maybe you have multiple sources of data and things are named differently in different sources. So it's super important that you work with the firm with a data architect in place, some experience working with those data sources. And before you start any migration, if your migration is going smoothly, you'll be having a lot of data workshops, identifying all the different fields and objects that you're using to manage your data. So if you don't see someone sitting down with you on a board and drawing out your entire architecture or your database architecture and going through field by field with you, then there's definitely a problem. Like data migration for legal firms, it's a massive process. So make sure you work with a senior architect.
Got it. Yeah, that's a big thing, right? And we talk about the concept of garbage in, garbage out, right? When you're getting prepared
Yeah.
for migration, I think an architect can really be, one of those that can determine what are some things that you don't want to bring over, right? Are we starting fresh, or are we starting with, 20 years of data? So what are some things that, a data architect would talk about with a firm about how to optimize and manage that, that junk in, junk out type of protocol?
Yep. Exactly. And it's very important, like to determine, like, do you want to, if you're a law firm with, 15 years of history, right? So how much data do you want to bring over? And maybe you want to archive some data and bring over last 7 years or 10 years, whatever the requirement is. Once you know what you're working with and what you want to bring over, so all of those things are very important. And a lot of times you don't know something has gone wrong until it's done and you're in the new system and things are not matching. So it's very critical to have a proper inventory of your data, your case counts, type of cases, and have some of the statistics. So when your vendor is working with you, you can also double check and confirm things are matching and before the vendor leaves you. And don't sunset your old system until you have confirmed and properly tested that all your migrations have gone smoothly.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. And we talk about the concept of archiving, and I have a long healthcare IT background, and data archiving was something where, hospitals need to retain the records for at least 7 to 12 years, in some cases longer. So on the concept of medical records, George Bessenyei, that's really your expertise. Can you help the group understand, what are some things that firms are thinking about when they're using an existing medical record retrieval company and having to store those records and they're in the middle of a migration, right? Or they want to go to a new migration. What's the best way for those medical records to come over, and what questions should they be asking their vendor?
Yeah, I mean, that could be really massive. We have seen some cases where the big question is where those records are stored. In some cases, it's in the case management system, and in other cases, it's at the record retrieval company, so the vendor storing those records. And in some cases, you have duplicates, so some at the record retrieval company and both in the case management system. I think that's actually the best way to do it going forward. So if you can implement that you have, it's kind of a backup at your record retrieval company and your own records in your case management system, that's probably the best way to do it. But we have seen examples where larger law firms made changes in record retrieval companies, for example, coming to us, and they had troubles accessing the old records at the company they are not using anymore, because that was the only place where those records resided, what they received, 4 years ago, for a case still ongoing, but they are not a client anymore of that record retrieval company. And the same could happen with the case management software as well. So the data migration, typically, it's only what law firms typically call the metadata, what is migrated into the new system. And oftentimes it's very hard to get the actual documents assigned to the case in the migration. So we see challenges with that as well. And it couldn't be just medical records. It could be all kind of briefs for the case being imported into the new system because they are stored so differently. And so both could be quite problematic. I think it's crucial when you are selecting a new case management software or when you are selecting a new medical record retrieval company to review the contract, what it says on termination, and if they are willing to export the data out and give it to you. I think the best solutions is when the data is held at a third party. We implemented that internally, so the medical records actually not us storing them, but either Google or Microsoft in a HIPAA compliant way, and our clients can decide which one they choose when they sign up with us. So it's actually at a third party. It doesn't really matter what happens with your relationship with us. Those records will be still there. So that's probably a suggestion when signing up new vendors.
Good. And just from a perspective of interoperability, right? This is a big term that's being passed around now with standards of data aggregation changing. And so, from your perspective too, how can a law firm ensure that their case management system has access to other third parties to store data or to ingest data, right? I think we're seeing a big shift in the industry, for legal tech companies to work together to share and open up their APIs. So what are some best practices that law firms can ask vendors to ensure that they support this?
I mean, we are talking about Tiffanny, and that's definitely a good example for that because they use the Salesforce API. So pretty much everything you can achieve using an API, meaning with a third-party system, assuming they have proper permissions. So I think, again, the same question when you are selecting a vendor, check if they have an open API system others can connect to, or they are able to connect into other API systems, because these days, this system needs to communicate with each other. So there is no standalone case management software what can do everything. You will need integration partners. And funnily, there was one case management software, I shouldn't name them, but that was their policy for 10 years that we are not opening up. Nobody can access our system. This is a closed system. And that was some of their sales pitch, that this is a closed system. There's no API. We are not letting any integration partners in. The whole management was fired, I think, 2 years ago, and now they are the biggest on integration. And there are really good examples. I mean, Tiffanny definitely by design, it's very accessible, but even the ones mentioned before, I think Clio was probably the first one who opened up their API to vendors, and we were one of the first companies to join. So definitely you need systems which are able to communicate with other systems. Otherwise, it will just not work, the whole concept.
Yeah, that's very, very important because I remember one of the migrations we were doing for a major firm with millions of documents, and apparently their system was so locked that they could not. We had to write a special script for like a robotic script that can go and act like a
That's hard.
user and download one document at a time. I'm dead serious. Like you could not mass download documents, so we had to write script that can go like a robotic script can go and pretend to be a user. So we had to do it over days and days and days, just script running and clicking on the screen, downloading a document, taking screen capture of the metadata. I mean, insane. Because
That's
apparently
insane.
they would charge a huge amount of money just for API access, and even then they didn't really want to give it. And I don't want to mention the company, but it's so you need to make sure like if whatever company you're going to, you're not getting stuck.
And this was a big debate. I remember in like 2017, 18. I mean, we were totally in favor of connecting APIs, but if you read the blogs, like Bob Ambrogi's blog, for example, was very popular in the legal tech space. There was this ongoing debate between systems like Clio advocating for open API access, and then others we shouldn't name advocating for totally closed systems. I mean, it was pretty obvious who will win, but at that point it was a legitimate debate, like 17, 18, and then eventually even the cloud usage, of course, was kind of debated back then. Like, should you use for your law firm a cloud system or not? And yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious how that ended up.
Sounds like liberating the data is not going to be an option anymore.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
All right.
migration wise, I want to state one more thing is we've seen some farms with have like a really large files and sometimes video files or large file size, and some of the systems where you're migrating to may support file size up to a certain point. So those things are very important if your farm needs to store a lot of files, and especially the ones that are large. So keep those in mind whenever you're picking a company where you want to migrate to.
Got it. So ensuring that the vendor has a lot of experience with handling large data sizes, large file sizes. When we get into larger firms, I mean, there's generally terabytes of data that are being stored, right? So that's a good point to bring up too. Okay. So our next point is around data corruption and loss, right? I mean, I think this is one of the most, feared topics in any type of migration, losing data. And so, I think that there's some companies that, do a good job about making sure that their clients advocate for their data and ask for the right type of data format, right? I think that's also a big part of making sure that you have a complete migration, because you don't want to have missing documents or images or missing notes, right? So what are some, ways that a firm could ask their current vendor and ensure that they're getting the full database backup, right? If you want to speak to formats, that might be good, just so that, folks can write those tips down.
I can mention a couple of strategies we do whenever we take on data migration projects. What we tell people, let's go ahead and have them enter a fake record of every single thing you want to track for your matter. So let's say you track all the different matter related details, any insurance company details, any type of documents you want to track. So we have them go through and create some fake records with every single field you want included, every single document you want included, every single child records you want included. So then we will go and check because the database may have hundreds of fields, right? But maybe you're not using all of them. And maybe one firm is using some of those, the other firm is not, and maybe you're using custom fields. So one of the strategy we use is asking them to populate some records with every single type of data they could potentially be tracking, and using those dummy records to kind of create some sort of parameters to see, okay, what does your overall data types look like? And then we literally go through every single field and what the field types are. And when you're migrating, you may have a field with 10 different drop downs, and system you're taking to, do you want to keep having those same list of drop downs. So do you want to, migration is a great time to clean up as well, right? But do you want to clean up? So all of those things kind of are very important to making sure you're not losing data. I don't think typically the people, whenever they migrate from one system to the other, where things go wrong is maybe you're migrating from Needles, and Needles has the parent-child relationship set up in certain way. You're migrating to a new system, it doesn't quite, architecture is not quite the same, maybe a little different. So some companies, not maybe companies who are not that experienced, a lot of times will mess those up, or sometimes we see that happen. So it's very important to make sure vendor who's working with you understand your data architecture, because if you're coming from a system it's very open like Needles, where you can store your data any way you want and you can even create your own architecture. So making sure however you're capturing your data architecture is properly understood, and when you are converting it to a new system with a different architecture, in that conversion there's some data loss could happen. So to prevent it is proper mapping guidelines, like make sure you have gone through and mapped out every single object, every single field. Like this is the object in source system, this is the object in destination system. And even I would even recommend go field by field, not even, and even further, if you have a pick list or drop down, uh, map out every single one of your drop downs. And at the end, what we have is automated Python scripts that will go through API and connect to both systems and check data integrity, right? In addition to humans checking it, to make sure your vendor is doing those integrity checks, not just human beings testing it. You should have also automated external scripts going to both systems and checking to see is the data matching, are there integrity issues. Document migration is something I think most companies, I've seen less problem with the document migration versus more problems with people messing up the actual data or not putting it in the right architecture.
Got it. And two things that come to mind from those points, and that's a great overview, George. Thank you. One is taking some of that dummy data that you're saying that a practice should create. Is it best practice to say, here's a test file from my current vendor. Before I get into a relationship with my new vendor, I want to make sure that you can handle this type of format. Is that something that you see that a lot of firms are bringing to their new vendor just to make sure that there's not going to be an issue later on down the road?
So I think the problem is even before that, because giving a file to a vendor saying this is my current data, many systems, complicated systems like Needles, a law firm's not going to know how to export that. I mean, it's
Okay.
not, it'll be tough. And even if they export, they may have some technical resources, they'll export some data, and it's going to be wrong. So your vendor needs to have the skill set to go into your current database and be able to export that. If you come from like a Excel, whatever, in that case, yes. But if you are tracking in any complex old legal systems, chances are your internal folks are not going to know exactly how to export out of
Mhm.
those databases. I mean, Needles, even from one version to the next, is super complex. So I would be very surprised if law firms know how to export that.
Okay. And then one other thing that comes to mind too is around the document management systems. So are you seeing like a lot of vendors being able to support document management systems in-house, or are they working with third parties to manage that document load?
Document management is also challenging. Like if a lot of times people are using maybe their internal, they have their Google Drive or their OneDrive, and they're storing their documents. Sometimes if they already have a system like Lidifi's Docrio or some other document management, and DocuSign CLM, etc. So there's different document management products out there, but making sure that properly correlates with your matter and there is a relationship and documents not all over the place, right? So whenever we are migrating, we kind of map out where you're currently storing your documents. How do you map that to your existing cases that you're running? Maybe cases you closed out a while ago and you have archived your documents for those, but you want to be able to access those at some point. So what's the strategy, right? So it varies. And a lot of times what firms struggle is they don't really have an internal resource to, a lot of law firms don't. That's what we see, who understand the technology and where the things are being stored and how that's getting mapped. So, and some firms are lucky that they have someone who really understands the whole picture. So it really varies. But it really boils down to if you're firm's management and don't have strong internal resource who understands all that, working with solid firms who can dive into your existing data and figure it out and asking you the right questions. If your vendor's not asking you questions and annoying you with multiple workshops, something's wrong.
That's a great point. That's a great point. So that brings us into our next segue around legal case management implementations, right? So I think for every project to be successful, we talked a little bit about, the right questions to ask and how to plan and assess that workflow. In general, when you're working on migration, you might be working with multiple extracts of the data set, right? You might be working with test data ahead of time and then using, a certain subset of data for go live or doing a full migration. So, for a firm, it could be a single practitioner or it could be, a mid-sized law firm. What are some best practices to establishing an implementation timeline? And, generally, what's the average turnaround time do you see for that to be successful?
So I would say planning out before even the timeline to understand that few things should be worked out. First is identify who are the folks in the firms, let's say, who handles intakes, who handles cases, the matter stages, finances, kind of identify those folks who are typically in those segmented areas, finance, your matter team, data team, etc. So identify those and then plan out several workshops, right? Have strong workshops talking about how you're currently managing your intakes, how you're managing your matters, how many matter teams you have, what kind of document retrieval tools are you using, how is that the whole process is working. So the stronger planning that goes into place in doing those, the better your timeline will look like. And as far as the timeline, case management timeline looks like, now I've seen firms, I'll tell you the worst case scenario that I've seen when things are not properly planned out and architected, what could happen. We had farms come to us, save us, and they have been implementing and I'm not kidding, I've seen this like 4 or 5 years, and they're paying the licenses for many years, and they have gone through 3, 4 different firms, and they're still implementing. And so that's like the worst case that could happen if things are not architected from day one. You really need to sit down with your firm, understand how your firm does the business, how the data is structured, how you're managing your intakes. If you have Google ads, Facebook ads, etc., you have CallRail, however you're managing your intake process, make sure that's all well documented. However, you have your cases managed. Maybe you have 5 different matter teams, and then what are the stages matters going through? How you're managing your finances? How do you integrate with your accounting systems like QuickBooks? What does your settlement statement looks like? What kind of integrations with document retrieval companies you should have? Make sure you have discussed with your vendor all of these portions, properly architected out. A lot of times people just create a scope based on high-level conversation with senior management, don't go into detail. And if you're working with a firm that are like every single new discovery is a change request, you'll end up with a 5-year implementation plan. So it's very important you work with a firm that don't nickel and dime you, right? And come up with a scope that's manageable, and you discuss every single details. We have implemented the longest it took us to implement. I would say it was like 9 months at the most that it took us. Typically, our implementations run between 6 months to 9. I would say worst case 1 year if it's a massive firm with many branches, but it should not take more than that. If it's taking you more than a year, something has gone wrong.
Yeah, that's a great point. And George Bessenyei too, from a medical records perspective, we see there's a lot of situations where, some firms have to get out of the current service and they're going on to a new service, right? So what does that switch over look like? And generally, what's an ideal timeline?
I mean, we are kind of lucky because we are typically coming into the picture on like step 7 here, like when everything is done. Sometimes new clients sign a contract with us on step 1, but then we don't hear from them for almost a year until the implementation happens. That was kind of, I think, the basic of our success. Many of the clients selecting us when they are changing into a new system. So they were unhappy with their case management software, but at the same time, they are unhappy with their record retrieval company. And they are like, yeah, let's change it all. And we have seen, I mean, the biggest challenge, and it's unfortunately happening quite regularly, that they used another medical record retrieval company, thing I mentioned earlier. And the only way they can access those records if they remain a client of that company. And if they want to export those old records which stored in that system, they have to download them one by one. So kind of the same way George A. just described, you have to probably write a robot which does it pretending to be a user and downloading them one by one, the records. So that's probably the worst case scenario. I think there is one common thing going back to the point like on the case management software, when we are seeing this really bad implementation records, either it's taking like 2 years or more. I think 2 years was the longest I have seen. But in pretty much in all cases, they are doing it in-house. And they don't have anybody with any kind of tech, even basic tech knowledge. I mean, they are a law firm, why would they? They have mostly like paralegals, attorneys, sometimes an attorney kind of good with the computer takes on the project. And I mean, he or she is a brilliant attorney for sure, but doesn't even know what a variable is or fields and stuff like that. So it's very difficult for us to explain. And then we see the whole thing kind of collapsing. So that's why I guess Micronetbd could come into the picture, because pretty much in all disasters we have seen, it was done in-house by the law firm. And on the success stories, sometimes they hire full-time staff to handle it, which is also an option. But I think most of the success stories are hiring a company like George's and handle the migration. The medical record part is much easier as long as you have access to the old records. So that's the crucial part. If you have done that, then you can be done in like 4 days, integrating our services into your new case management software. So it's a whole different story than migrating an old case management software into a new one.
Okay, those are great points. So creating a realistic timeline with, internal stakeholders, aligning all teams internally, operations, IT, and attorneys, and really, leaning on trusted experts if you don't know how to handle it internally.
Yeah, totally. And it's so common, this mistake. I would say like 20% of the cases we are seeing, they are not hiring an expert to deal with, and it's just not going well. I mean, it end the same way if I start writing, I don't know, a lawsuit brief on my own. I mean, what are the chances I win that case, right? Very low. Kind of the same story if a lawyer starts doing implementing a new case management software or migrating from an old one. It's a complex job.
Sure. Okay, we have another question, but we can also send this out afterwards, since I don't know if the chat's working right now. But basically, what is your biggest concern when migrating data to a new case management system? It could be all of the above here. So we'll be sending out a questionnaire afterwards too, and you can provide your responses.
And I want to add to what George said, is sometimes maybe you have strong technical resources internally and you can think you can handle it. But the thing is, you don't know what you don't know. So even in those cases, with a strong technical resource, it's always good to partner up. Like we have seen where there's a very strong person internally, but then when they partner with someone like us, maybe we are managing the architecture, and then we're saying, okay, since you can do this, I will delegate these portions to you. Go ahead and you do this portion. We will handle this, but at least you have someone expert who does this day in and day out, manage the architecture and the planning, and we can take advantage of the internal strong resources. So that works too. If you have the internal strong resources, we partner with them, but instead of doing 100% internally.
Yeah, I so strongly advise against doing it all in-house, just based on the examples we have seen on our end.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Great point. All right. So next we're going into contractual clarity and vendor agreements, right? I mean, we have mostly attorneys obviously on this call, so I'm sure there'll be strong advocates in negotiating the contract. But, if you don't have the technical lingo on what to ask, that could kind of, be a loophole, right? So we want to make sure that you have the right information to arm those conversations. So with me, I also have Amanda Sparks, our EVP of development at Micronetbd. So Amanda, I'm sure you handle clients every day that just have, 55 to 100 page, contracts with their vendor and they don't understand half of it of, what to ask, right? So, if you can help kind of guide the group about, what to ask for, we can explore a little bit under SLAs, data security and ownership rights, as well as any red flags that you've seen.
Sure. So one of the big things when you're looking to get into a new software agreement, we've already talked about things like data, getting your data organized and things like that, but you want to make sure that you have terms in your contract that can help you when you get into situations with your software where you need to leverage those terms. So one of the areas are these SLAs. There's often standard terminology in these contracts, but one of the things I don't think people realize that you can add pretty easily and negotiate around are performance guarantees around those SLAs. Even if you have a partner like Micronet helping you, and one of the big benefits to having an external partner is you're going to have a software agreements with multiple vendors, and each of those vendors is going to be looking out for their software. So, for example, if you have an issue with software A, you as their customer are going to put in a ticket with that software to try to get that resolved. But if you have an external partner like a Micronetbd, we're going to try to help you fix that problem, and we're going to be advocating for you with that software vendor, but we may also have the expertise to solve that for you. But if we can't, if you have a performance guarantee against your SLA, so say their standard SLA is 24 hours, they're going to get back to you on their ticket. Well, that just means somebody's going to send you a message that says, we are working on this ticket for you. But if you have a performance guarantee that says, some percentage of their fees are at risk if they don't resolve your ticket to your satisfaction within a certain amount of time, you can leverage that in situations where there's some kind of an issue with your software. So I would highly recommend trying to negotiate in performance guarantees. You can also put those in place for things that George Ayub was talking about in regards to the end or the termination of your agreement and what happens to your data. One of the big issues, especially with AI and some of the fancy things that software will start advertising to you around is, oh, we've got these performance models or these predictive analytical models that will start using your data and will start giving you back insights about your data. Well, do I own those insights? And will you give me that data back? And then if I leave you, do I own that? And if I do, how difficult is it going to be for me to get that memorialized and own that and get it out into my own database if I ever leave your company? Those are the types of things that you should think about and sort of put into writing when you get into an agreement with these software companies that would be outside their standard terms. And let's see, and things like the implementation timeline that we talked about a little bit earlier, you can put SLAs and even performance guarantees against those. But again, their main goal is to get you implemented at some point. They're not necessarily so concerned because you're going to be paying their software fees. But if you have like a partner like us, we want to get you implemented as quickly as possible. So I think that all of those things can be considered when you're doing those contracts. Another area, Tiffanny, that we had talked about yesterday are this idea of perpetual licenses versus like an annual software license. Perpetual licenses used to be this really attractive thing, but one of the pitfalls of those, if you get into those types of agreements, would be, and they're often less common now in the SaaS world, but you don't often get the support or the updates of the software if you sign a perpetual licensing agreement. So just make sure that you read the fine print on those. Typically, if you have like an annual subscription-based license, those will come with updates and some kind of standard support. But again, read the fine print on the SLAs of their support, because support is one area where we've seen a lot of customers really get let down by these vendors and just not get the service that they need. And to George Ayub's point, that's when they call us, save us. So Yeah.
Okay, great. So just because it's called a perpetual license doesn't mean that the benefits are permanent, right? And software vendors know that.
Yeah, yeah, the benefits might be permanent in terms of like you'll always have access to this version of our software, but
Hmm.
if we update it and make it better, your perpetual license doesn't give you access to the new updated version. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, sometimes that can be the case.
Okay, great. And then what about maintenance fees? I know a lot of contracts, there's generally a percent over year where you have to, be charged for maintenance. How can you negotiate that to be to your advantage?
You can definitely negotiate around those maintenance fees. Typically, they're going to end up playing a shell game with those. And I would recommend, you know, speaking to somebody like us. One of the benefits of working with a third party for on implementation is that we have access to costs across a lot of customers that work with these vendors, so we can help understand, what the benchmark costs are for not only the platform fees, but then also things like maintenance
Mm,
fees and implementation costs. And so that's one benefit of working with a third party for implementation is that we can help you with benchmarking and negotiating these costs. But another thing is honestly, like with software as a service, your annual subscription license should cover the maintenance of that. So if you're buying an annual subscription license, you really shouldn't be paying maintenance fees on top of that.
hmm.
So I would highly recommend negotiating those out.
And
Great,
I would
great.
add a trick, which most companies probably will hate for me to say this, but I will share that anyway. Is during implementation for most of these farms you switch to, they're charging you license fees, right? So your license fees that you pay for all the employees starts from day one. Well, you do have the right to buy a few
Hmm.
licenses at the start, and they will say, okay, how many people will use, etc. Well, on day one, you don't necessarily have to buy all the licenses. I mean, you do have the right to go and say, yeah, I just want to buy such and such system, Clio, whatever system, for 5 employees, right? They'll say, oh, how many lawyers do you have? This, yeah, yeah, but I just want to buy it for 5 employees, right? And then once you implement it, go buy add the licenses, right? But a lot of these law firms will paying for 200 licenses for day one, and they're not live for
Hmm.
2 years.
Hmm.
That's crazy. So, and I know that's what kind of they lock you into, but you don't have to do it. Like you can insist on like, do I have the right to buy a few licenses on day one? Especially that will ensure that they also have an added stake in making sure you're live because if you're paying for a license from day one, what
Hmm.
incentive do they have
Yeah.
of making sure you go live
Hmm.
fast? Because that's when you have change requests after change requests because no matter how long implementation takes, they're still getting paid for subscription. So that's one thing I would mention.
Great. So push back on those tiers, right? Like just if there's a starter license available and it's a smaller firm, don't be
Hmm.
afraid to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we talked a little bit about, milestones with our timelines. We also talked a little bit about, staff training. I think, as Amanda mentioned earlier, that's kind of the part where, there's a little bit of a concern around having that optimal experience, right? So what are some ways that you can, factor in asking for the best type of training plan for your firm? I know some, softwares will do a train the trainer model or they'll do remote training. I think some organizations will also offer in-office training. What are some ways that we can ensure that you're getting the most optimal experience? Amanda, what are some of your insights to that?
I think I think train the trainer can be good, but again, for a law firm, it's a little tricky. It depends on what your internal staffing model is. Do you have somebody internally that is going to be with you long term that's going to feel comfortable uh, technically training new associates on this software? Because that's the assumption with a train the trainer model. So I think that is something that you need to think about. A preference would be, and something that we at Micronet try to offer with the software packages that we install is like video and PDF files and libraries to our customers so that they always have access to the training. That's certainly more preferable. so that it can be self-led training for any new users that come on board throughout the life of your subscription. So I think that's preferable to the train the trainer approach, which is, I mean, really, it's just we're going to train whoever you've got, on that one day that can come to that 1 hour that we're going to offer, and whatever you do with that is up to you. And it typically gives them very little accountability for actually training your team.
Mhm.
So I would put language around what that actually means in your contract, and I would ask for hard copies of or video files and PDF files that you can then scale and use to scale and document training within your team. That would be my recommendation there.
I can also add my 2 cents here. While
Mm-hmm.
we were implementing Leadify, the way we did it, basically after the implementation, we were live for 5 days in a row, and we had entire day we were live basically from 10 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. And the entire day we basically helped them training. Anytime anyone wants to hop in, they can just hop in and ask any questions, or the entire hours throughout the shift, they can just train themselves. They can join in a bunch of group, or they can just have like small groups of like 5 individual or 6 individual or 10. So that's what we did while we implemented some of our OEM. Also, we have done some in-person training too. We went to farms which were like, close by, or sometimes we even flew there too and gave some in-person training after the implementation. So yeah, we pretty much, tried all the bells and whistles of training the trainers, and pretty much all of them are quite acceptable. They like it. But then again, that Amanda said, we also have our other materials, like, we have PDF, we have videos, and all the other materials to train the new users. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's important to have a library access, right, for new users as they come in, so that, if there's a new staff that's onboarded, that they have access to additional resources. So it's turnkey for them to get up to speed very quickly. Great. And George, Bessenyei, in the medical record space, I know when a lot of people think, oh, I want to outsource, they're kind of scared and a little hesitant about that, but they want the efficiencies of having a team that can support, a large effort, right, such as chasing medical records. So from your experience too, you work with, many companies with setting up onboarding teams. What makes a successful onboarding team, in this space?
Typically, it's successful when we came into the picture when all the other issues been sorted out. It's not always the case, but like we discussed on the timeline slide, in the best case scenario, we come into the picture on step 7. So the case management software is already decided, and they already set up the structure because all these systems are highly customizable. The worst case for us when they hire us early on, we set up everything in the current system and they keep changing it, and 3 months later it's an entirely different system. The records needs to go to a different place, the updates needs to go to another place. So I think the success for us, when the system is already done, sort of mostly final, it's set up the way they prefer it, and then we come into the whole process and set it up matching the system on the other end, because we try not to make any changes. So we always try to follow the way the customer, the client likes it, and the law firm prefers the data to appear. We are providing crucial data for the case. So I think without medical records, practically there is no case for most of our clients. So they need to know everything, not only the records, but where it's standing, was it really ordered, what happened the last time, what was on the last call sometimes, because we need those records on Friday. Is there a chance to get it by Friday? And so on. So they need a lot of information beyond just retrieving the records, like what's going on with the request. And these information need to appear on the right place in their new software. And in many cases, I don't have a good estimate, but probably I would say 70% of the cases, they are hiring us because they are changing their case management software. And there are clients, they use the existing one and just changing the record retrieval vendor. But in many cases, this happens at the same time. They typically already made a decision on, they go say with Litify, and then they need a new vendor which integrates with Litify. And that's typically when they select us. So we are always coming into sort of a moving train, and it's still not final, but the closer we are at the finish line, the better the experience, I think, for the clients, because they don't need to come back to us and ask for further changes. We don't charge anything. It's just delaying the procedure if we have to make further changes in the system because they made some changes internally. So I think a successful setup, they are on a new system, already worked out the kinks, and it's almost ready or it's ready. And then they are telling us how they want the medical records to appear, how they want to order it from the system. And then we can be done in like 4 days versus the sometimes close to a year timeline to get with a new system.
And I would say that like we've worked with different medical records retrieval systems, but I would say one of the things YoCierge's product is I find very impressive. It's not only so the integration from a technical perspective. I always say this because YoCierge team is highly familiar with Litify backend. So the medical record, like the proper integration points, other retrieval companies, the integration is not that solid. So there is some disconnect. And after you have the records, the expense records, like YoCierge team properly creates that expense record to it gets routed in the right place. So I think, so from a technical perspective, I like how the process that YoCierge is using for that you're able to request the medical records directly from Litify and how the records coming back and how the expenses are coming back. Those integration points are smooth. So I think from a technical perspective, this product, I would say it's a little bit better overall integrating with and so that I think that's why, yes, you work with other medical retrieval companies too, but I think we typically like to recommend YoCierge because I'm a technical person and I like to see when all the technical portions and integrations are nicely squared off and you don't have to do like this in the system and then 5 other steps you have to do manually. So it's less manual intervention, I would say.
No, thanks for that. I think the reason why we can do it because we're kind of unique of having our internal development team. I think most of our competitors using external companies. So if there's a change in Litify, they have to talk to somebody to make the changes in their record retrieval system. So it's in sync with Litify. In our case, it takes me an email and typically it's done next morning when the client opens. So that's a huge advantage. I'm a computer programmer by training, so obviously I'm very focused on the integration part and the technology part of the whole business. Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's a key differentiator because a lot of these medical retrieval companies, you have 5 layers of business management before you get to an actual engineer. But here, George himself, he runs a major company, but he himself is a technical person, and he has a team of technical engineers. So integration and making sure things are automated and smooth. And if we are missing something, it just takes one phone call, and George would be on the phone with his engineering team, and voila, it's in the product. So I think that's one of the advantage I see working with YoCierge team.
Thanks. Yeah, it's nice to hear that. That we have zero bureaucracy here.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's nice coming over from healthcare.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay. I know we have about 3 minutes left. So just one kind of note about business continuity, right? I've seen in many instances where, staff has a go live date in mind and they think that we're going to shut off one system on X date and then go live on another date, right? So that's in many in situations that is feasible, right? But how do you ensure, establishing a proper, cutoff date and start date, ensuring business continuity that, nothing's being missed, right, in that time frame, especially, as cases need to continue running, right? So what are some best practices around business continuity?
I'll take that. So the typical best practice for us is we ask the law firm to stop logging any new cases into the system. Friday, end of day, we define a time, let's say by 5 p.m., 6 p.m., stop logging into your old system, and we have a complete freeze until Monday morning. And then over the weekend, so we do the initial migrations before, and then we do the delta move. So we plan out, okay, so everything that we migrated, let's say we took the data snapshot up to X date. So from that X date until this 5 p.m. on Friday, we call it the delta load. So we do the delta load over the weekend, test it out over the weekend. So on Monday when they come back, they start fresh in the new system. And so you never have a situation where you're using the new system and you're using the old system. And we make the old system read-only on Monday morning, and everyone's instructed to use the new system.
Okay.
And then we have one additional thing that after doing so many implementations that we invented is we have what we call live support. So during first week, we literally have a Zoom session with engineers live from 9 a.m. till 6 p.m., where during that time users are coming in and going. And all through the week, we have this live support the entire week. So any issues they're running into, we're right there with them.
Got it. Got it. So you're using a delta loaded catch-up file essentially for that third extract, working with like initially for a test extract and then a final extract right before go live. Okay. Yep. Good practice.
Exactly.
Okay, I know we are about at the hour mark. We definitely touched on some, staff training and change management issues. Again, we'll have all of this ready for you. And I think we've had such an interactive discussion that, we can continue it at a separate call for around compliance and security questions. So with that, I know that Micronetbd wanted to talk a little bit about docu-mandatory, and then we could talk a little bit about our giveaway time.
Sure. So if you're using Lidify, you already have Docrio, which works great, but some of the other systems that you may be using, so those systems, we have seen some gaps in terms of being able to properly manage the document and the document management workflow, the AI-based document summary, be able to add a document to the Matter straight from your desktop, and that being automatically uploaded to your Matter. So there's a lot of gaps. So for our companies that we work with, our internal clients, maybe you're using Practice Panther or some other system. And for our internal clients, we had created a solution where it's a document management solution where you can upload your document, you can create your document, you can do AI summary. We have desktop add-on that can automatically synchronize with the desktop, just like Google Drive. So far, we haven't sold it as a product out in the market to people who are not our implementation clients, but that's changing. So we are launching, we're making this available to the wider audience, people who are using other legal systems. So we're seeing this being a lot of challenge, especially some of the legal systems have like document size limits, etc. So this, you can manage, upload documents, have AI-based summary, is secure, and we also have automated backups. So you don't have to worry about losing your document, the version control. So if you change something in your document, you can have proper tracing, and also you can send out your documents through fax, email, also through USPS. We have integration with the API with print facilities that can print out the document through USPS. So it's a full document management, be able to send out the documents, print out your documents. This is a product that evolved by helping our internal clients that we work with, but now we are going to be putting it out more like as a product. So this is something we'll be going out to being available to a wider audience. Something, and not to anyone on Lidify, but it's non-Lidify clients.
So which system it works with? Practice Panther?
Right now, Practice Panther, Clio. I think there's like four different legal CRMs, and we can easily add. If a client comes to us, we can easily add other ones as long as they have API access.
Great.
Okay, great. So we will be announcing the winners of our giveaways. Again, we have our Grubhub coupons, our free system checkup, as well as a free medical record review analysis. And then we also have a free IT ticket resolution that our Micronetbd team would help support in your firm too. So if you have an issue that's been on the burner for a long time and you want it resolved, the Micronetbd team is going to help you with analyzing that. Great. So George, I know that you've also been, really innovative in the past year with some innovation and getting records faster. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that for, what we're doing within the New York landscape as well as the Delaware landscape.
Yeah. So, we are spending most of our development resources to get the records faster. and cheaper. And the biggest thing we had now, a few weeks ago, it started working in New York, a system what we developed in-house, where the patient can just get a selfie and we can query 90% of the New York providers, locate the records and download them basically with no per page fee at all. And in typically 7-8 hours after the selfie procedure was finished by the patient, it's nothing comparable that's out there on the market. Nobody has anything similar to it, so we're very proud of it. And we are adding new states one by one. Delaware will come online, I think actually next week. So we will have the same system in Delaware, and we have other states in the hopper, which coming online probably in the next month or so. Basically, you don't have to wait 20-30 days to get those records. And the other challenge is sometimes the patient not remembering where they received treatment. So this resolves that issue as well, because we are the one locating the records in the given state and get you what we find. So that's something we are very happy to talk to any client operating in those states especially.
Oh, that's great, especially for accidents in multiple states, right? Being able to access records, very quickly. If you don't have a relationship, with a local provider, but it's also covering a lot of the health system, data as well as your local provider data too.
Yeah,
great,
absolutely.
Game changing.
It is.
Okay, you can also use this QR code if you'd like to hear from an expert and one of these companies. Again, feel free if there's any other questions that you have to send them to either myself or to Tashin, and we'll make sure that those are addressed. And you should be getting a recording of this, sent out to you automatically if you register through Zoom. If not, then we'll make sure that we'll also send this out, and it'll be on our YouTube channels and social media platforms as well. Great. Well, thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you.
You have a great rest of your day. This is also the same information for Micronetbd. You can use their QR code. Again, do not hesitate to reach out with any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.